Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge. In today's episode, he ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. After that, credit card skimmer gets what he bought with my card, and a bit extra. Post from r/Vancouver. Finally, you refuse to do your job. Watch me weaponize bureaucracy. Before we get into today's episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss another episode of r/ProRevenge. He ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. Obligatory apology for formatting as I'm on mobile. Kinda my revenge. Kinda my sister's. Both of us really proud. This is gonna be long, so too long didn't read at bottom. Here's our cast. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story. Sister's ex-boyfriend, Paul. Ex-BF's new wife, Jane. Ex-BF's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe. Oldest brother, Zeke. Our parents and me, smiley face. When I was 14 and my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time. Sarah had a horrible pregnancy, about 16-18 weeks, and the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, which if you don't know is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain. She developed gestational diabetes, and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, your body is built to do this. It can't be that bad. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it, because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest, because while standing or walking her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day, because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and that baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in, but wouldn't, because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mum and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest 2 brothers while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section, and while doing the operation discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous, tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, looking, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork as she should have been put off surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get her rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name. And still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, that was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges, because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him, because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife, herself. I take her back for a trim and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up, because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been infrequently paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be an ass and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic. Big shocker. And she was due in 10 weeks and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentlepeoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for and she said I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Braintley. You know the ones I'm talking about. And Paul had suggested so many already and she didn't like any of them. So I, conniving little weasel I am, said what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah, she was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it, she stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her, and to also remind him to pay his child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it, but doesn't want to bring it to school so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val. Credit card skimmer gets what he bought with my card, and a bit extra. X post from r/Vancouver. This story starts off with a slightly less humorous fact. A few days ago I was on the unfortunate end of credit card fraud. The fraudsters decided to take my CC info and purchase $1,000 worth of car parts from Philly and have it sent across the border to the city I currently live in, Vancouver, Canada. Normally, this is where the story ends. Sometimes they get away with it, sometimes they don't, but either way my card is replaced and I continue on living my life. This, however, is where the fun starts happening. I got a call this morning about a DHL shipment entering the country that required customs to be paid. Knowing I haven't shipped anything with DHL in forever, they are the worst, I quickly come to the realization that it must be the fraudsters shipping their goods here. It can't be. I thought. Who in their right mind would use a stolen credit card to order something to their own house in the city the owner of the card leaves? After a brief chat with DHL about the customs fees I will not be paying, I managed to obtain the address the package was being sent to. I hummed and hawed about it, but eventually decided the best thing to do was call the local police department and let them know what was up. I told the officer all about the situation. That unfortunately I did not know what car the parts were for and that I hope this info helps them somehow in the future. He tells me that the chances are slim, but he will swing by the house. It's literally 15 minutes from my own, just to see if anything weird is going on and follow up with me if he needs to. I thank him and go on with my work day. About an hour later I get a call from the same officer, obviously excited. Hi Atelier Vauxpont, it's Officer X. You will never guess what just happened. I was following up on the report and drove by the house. I decided to go knock on the door just to see if anyone was home and ask them a couple questions. A man opened the door and as we were talking, DHL drove up to deliver the package. Yes, that's right, the exact package we had been discussing. The delivery driver walks up to the door and says, "Hi, is Atelier Vauxpont there?" To which the man replies, "Oh yeah, he's just downstairs." You can imagine my surprise. That's pretty funny, because I just got off the phone with him and I know for a fact he doesn't live here, I said. The guy, no joke, looks me dead in the face and goes, "Oh whatever, the package is paid for." I chuckled and turned to the DHL driver to tell him should leave, because I need to make an arrest. "I'm calling you while I drive back to the precinct. Thought it might brighten your day." I still cannot believe that they caught the guy, but thought it was a story that was too good not to share. You refuse to do your job? Watch me weaponize bureaucracy. Last semester, I went abroad and studied at a tiny university. Due to it being so small, all paperwork was handled by one single secretary. Let me stress this. She did not have a lot of work to do. When I arrived, I needed to get my student ID. In this case, it was a simple, small piece of paper, just printed and cut out, not laminated, nothing. I went in and asked her for my ID, since I needed it to pay cheaper fares for public transport, for reduced prices on food, etc. She said, "Sure, come back next week, I'll have it ready then." Keep in mind she just had to print it and cut it out. It would have taken 3 minutes, but okay. I said sure and left. A week later I show up again. She goes, "Oh, sorry, I didn't get around to it yet. Come back in a week." I leave, a lot grumpier than the week before. I go to her office a week later, only to hear the same excuse. Not only did she not do it, she is acting visibly annoyed, loudly sighing upon seeing me. At this point, I'm mad. I'm on a budget and have been paying full prices everywhere, just because she can't seem to print out a piece of paper. I return the next day, and, proudly, she presents me with my ID. For an afternoon, I'm happy as can be. Then I realize my ID number does not match my documents. Essentially, it's useless. Putting it into the system, as done when receiving discounts, will not turn up my account documents. It's a dead end. I go back for her to correct it. Again, I'm sent away and told to wait another week. When I turn up again, she hands me the same ID with the wrong number. At this point, I hold a special hate for her in my heart and start to think about a plan to steal her time as much as she has stolen mine. When exam period comes around, I decide to mix it up a bit. I use both my real and fake ID number in my papers and confirmations of attendance. Those are all corrected and signed by professors, but have to be put into the system by her. So, consequently, not all of my credits show up in the system, but both I and my professors can confirm everything has been turned in and graded. It's now her responsibility to find the glitch and fix it. This might have been an easy task for a competent person, but she could not figure it out. I delighted in regularly asking her about individual courses and papers and watching her get more and more desperate. Eventually, she realized that the ID numbers were faulty. She wrote me an angry email, essentially asking how this could happen. I sweetly replied that I must have gotten it mixed up, given that I had waited weeks for my id and then received a faulty number twice before getting the real one several months into the semester. Sweet revenge.